So, if death is the separation of soul and body, why should the philosopher welcome it? Well, there's a short answer to that, but you have to read the text to really get the gist, more than the gist of the point that Socrates is going to make. But the short answer is that a philosopher loves knowledge, and real knowledge is only possible after the soul has separated from the body. That's the short answer. And that's what he's arguing here in the pages following, page 6, when he makes this startling claim that anybody who's a true philosopher should welcome death. And there really is an answer to that. That is because once the soul separates from the body, that is a liberation of the soul from the body. There's an assumption here, at least at this point in the dialogue, that the soul, of course, continues to exist after its separation. But we'll see that this is challenged in a very strong way at a certain point, and Socrates just has to dig in and try to prove that the soul does, in fact, exist after it's separated from the body. But at this point, he's painting a certain picture, and the picture is that when the soul leaves the body, it continues to exist, and that this is a kind of a liberation. And the liberation is from the what is often characterized as the prison house of the body. That is, that the body is the prison of the soul. And, you can certainly see that there is an echo of Christian thought here, the idea that we are liberated from the strictures of the body at death. But of course, Plato was writing 400 years before the birth of Christ, so a different sort of thing. But the liberation, it's a liberation because there's a reward, because Plato really seems to believe, or Socrates here really does seem to believe, that true knowledge is not something that we can get before death. That is, the reason that the philosopher welcomes death is because it's the promise of true knowledge. And it really does have to do with the liberation from the body. For instance, if we see here is a crucial passage at the top of page 7, where Socrates says, "What again shall we say of the actual acquirement of knowledge?" That is, how should we characterize how we actually get knowledge? And he says, "Is the body, if invited to share in the inquiry, a hinderer or a helper?" That is, does the body help us get knowledge, or does the body hinder us from getting knowledge? I mean to say, have sight and hearing and any truth in them? Are they not, as the poets are always telling us, inaccurate witnesses? And yet, if even they are inaccurate and indistinct, what is to be said of the other senses? For you will allow that they are the best of them. Certainly, he replied. Then when does the soul attain truth? And that's really the question. When does the soul attain truth? For in attempting to consider anything in company with the body, she is obviously deceived. So there is this notion that the soul, when we're alive, the soul gets closest to the truth when it's as much as possible separated from the body. So he says here, and thought is best when the mind is gathered into herself, and none of these things trouble her, neither sounds, nor sights, nor pain, nor any pleasure, when she takes leave of the body and has as little as possible to do with it, when she has no bodily sense or desire, but is aspiring after true being. And pay attention to that, true being. I mean, what is he talking about here? Let's just take a step back. He's just made a very radical claim, and that is that our senses, sight, hearing, touch, don't give us any insight into truth. And that, on the face of it, just doesn't seem correct. As if we think about seeing, well, seeing helps us to know things. Hearing helps us to know things. If you take something like this, mailboxes are blue. That's something, in the United States, mailboxes are blue. How do I know that? Well, I know because I looked and I saw that they were blue, what color they were. How could I have known that without my sense of sight? Sad songs are in a minor key, oftentimes. Let's just say that's something I know. Don't I know that because of my hearing? And so, isn't that an instant refutation of what Socrates is saying here? Socrates has said that the soul, and let's start thinking of the soul in a more expansive sense as the mind, consciousness, intellect. He has made this claim that the soul only knows things when it separates itself from the senses, but it seems to be obviously true that there's also sort of things that I do know only because I have senses. So, what the heck is he talking about here? Well, let me take a look at that. What does he mean by true being? And this gets us into this area of Plato, which is quite difficult, but is also maybe the central doctrine of Plato, and that's the so called theory of the forms. Uh, and if we start to get into it here, I guess we're at the sort of towards the bottom of page 7. He says, but there is another thing, Simmias. Is there or is there not an absolute justice? Assuredly there is. And an absolute beauty and absolute good, of course. But did you ever behold any of them with your eyes? Certainly not. Or did you ever reach them with any other bodily sense? And I speak not of these alone, but of absolute greatness and health and strength, and of the essence or true nature of everything. Has the reality of them ever been perceived by you through the bodily organs? Or rather, is not the nearest approach to the knowledge of their several natures made by him who so orders his intellectual vision, as to have the most exact conception of the essence of each thing which he considers? No, we'll have to look into that, what exactly he means.